Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ottumwa City Council meeting. It's 5:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope?
Here.
Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Councilmember Galloway?
Here.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Here.
Councilmember Hull?
Here.
Mayor Johnson?
Here. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
At this time, I would ask if there's anybody in the audience that wants to address any of the items on our agenda tonight. If not, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward.
Resolution number 85, 2022, designation of year one funding under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 85, 2022.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Phil?
All right, so I think everyone up here knows, and for the benefit of the public, the city was granted about a little over $3.6 million over the 2-year period. The funds need to be designated and expended for the end of calendar year 2024. Under this act, there are certain restrictions, requirements related to the funding and eligible spending. Public was invited to submit some requests in addition to those that came from staff. A number of projects were included or have been included in the recommended bonding request. Remaining projects were evaluated and included in the attached resolution. And the recommendation under the resolution is to utilize the $562,000 for replacing lost revenue during the pandemic. That is an eligible expense for the program. The next request was approximately $300,000 towards the shower house. That is a project that has been started, had received some prior funds from bonding in the past, and this is additional revenue needed to finish that project. One of the projects that was not included in the bonding, but would be beneficial for housing development in the city and be a way to leverage those funds going forward, is the medium density infill development prototyping. And if there are any questions about that particular project, Zach is here to answer any of those. That is $150,000 from the funds looked to for that project. And then the balance of the funds for the first year, it is recommended to place that into the City Hall HVAC or to offset some of the remaining cost of the City Hall HVAC project. And that is also one of the things that would be eligible under the programs, the spending on government services.
Does council have any questions for Phil or Zach?
So Phil, can you explain the benefit of using this money for the HVAC system for City Hall?
Yes, certainly. So one of the things, and we did have a portion of the project included in the bonding request. $700,000 was the maximum that we could do on the estimated $2.2 million project for HVAC. And so that amount is in the requested bonding. That leaves a gap of about $1.5 million for that. We have a system that is, I don't know if it's initial to the building, but it is decades old and it has needed a lot of TLC to keep it moving along year to year. In fact, I think last year we were concerned about it failing. We had a fairly mild winter this year, which was good. So it is an expense that is going to be incurred one way or the other. But the benefit here is, and we had a company come in and kind of do an evaluation looking at the energy efficiency that we could get from a new system, the increased productivity from having fresh air intake into the building. You know, I guess one of the things we saw when you have stale air and the concerns during the pandemic, this is a way to get that fresh air intake, get the airflow and keep that moving, which has health benefits as well. And that's kind of helps to increase with that productivity when you have cleaner air. So I guess essentially the reason for it coming out of here was this is something where the funds are eligible for that. We have exhausted the part of the bonding that we could take from that, and we need to have a revenue source to pay for the remaining part of that project. So based on the needs that are there and then the ways to pay for it, I guess is what I'm looking at as far as the benefits for this particular project.
Any other questions for Phil? If not, Zach, for the benefit of the public, would you just real briefly talk a little about the density infill development prototyping?
So with the prototyping, there's actually two projects that we're kind of looking at this point, and they both come out of the housing study and the work that we're doing around housing. The first is the medium density prototyping. The idea here is that the study identified a missing middle in terms of middle income affordable housing, but also in middle density as being a way to kind of close that gap in what we have with housing quickly, and also to make use of infill lots that are not the most attractive and most suitable for for owner-occupied single-family units. The issue with saying we want to go out and build a bunch of 3 to 6 unit developments on infill lots is that that's not a product that exists in our market, and it's something that requires unusual levels of sort of design attention. So the idea is that we would go in and work with architects to develop a set of prototypes, 3 or 4 concepts that suit corner or interior lots of the size that we have in our inventory. And if you build to that prototype, then there's no we'll make a change in the code, but there'd be no requirement to obtain an easement or a variance or anything like that, that you'd be able to build to that prototype as it is designed. We'd also make available with the prototype the building documents and construction documents that are necessary to avoid incurring the design expense. That's 6% or more of every construction project, that design expense. Finally, doing the prototyping, creating the sort of mechanism in the code to build that type of housing allows us to also offer incentives to do that, which allows us to do the demonstration projects to test that new market or test that new product on the market. And it also helps the person doing the development to go and obtain financing to get that type of product. So if the housing study says that we should look into doing that kind of development, this is the tool that's going to get us to doing that. The other type of prototyping we're looking at doing is designing, probably in this case, 2 or so single family home layouts, meeting with contractors within the Mission 500 program. That 6% cost that goes into design has been identified as something that could be significantly reduced if there was an available set of plans that folks already knew to build from. We've also looked at the idea of using these because they'll have already been reviewed to reduce or eliminate permitting fees for new construction, new houses, because if you build the house that's already been reviewed before, we don't have to go back and review those plans. We've already done it. So there's some opportunities to create some cost savings that would make it easier and more affordable for folks to build homes.
Thank you, Zach. Any other questions?
Zach, how many lots does the city currently own that this could benefit? Rough
Between
number.
30 and 40 right now, and we have 7 that we'll discuss later today that we're going to be serving tax certificates on as well, so that'll increase that number. And of course, one thing I've done just to sort of look at is I've taken areas of town and I've used the valuations to create a buffer on the map and just identify how many lots are valued under $5,000, and those are the vacant ones. And that tells us that there's dozens and dozens more out there that this program would also be beneficial for, that we don't own. Either we don't own them yet or we don't own them at all. But somebody like Rippling Waters or a private developer even could go and acquire those lots and build these types of projects on privately owned vacant lots too.
So we're talking potentially 75 to 100 lots.
Easily, yeah.
So, all right. Thanks, Zach.
Yep.
Any other questions?
If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Resolution number 86, 2022, setting April 5th, 2022 as the date of a public hearing on the disposition of city-owned property located at 817 Chester Avenue. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 86, 2022.
Do we have a recommendation?
So moved.
Move the recommendation is presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Zach, you're first.
All right, thank you. I'll be fast though. This one's just kind of one where we whiffed it a little bit. We held a public hearing to sell this property last week, and we hadn't published the notice in the paper to do that. So this is going to reset that public hearing for April 5th. That still gives Rippling Waters plenty of time to pour the foundation and to place the Homes for Iowa house on this lot. Just make sure we follow the process.
Any questions? Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Resolution number 88, 2022, approving and authorizing execution of subordination agreements related to mortgages held by the city of Ottumwa, Iowa on 303 East Main Street and 305 East Main Street. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 88, 2022.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Zach.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, and Jen is on the phone for this one as well, if there's anything that she wants to add or to help explain this. Speaking of Rippling Waters, they've received an offer to purchase properties at 303 and 305 East Main, and those properties participated in the 2018 CDBG Upper Story Housing Grant Program, and as a result, they have a 5-year forgivable mortgage attached to them that is meant to secure the property owner complying with the rent restriction that's part of that program. So those units have to be made affordable for at least that 5-year period. And to make sure that whoever owns those properties does that, the city attached a mortgage that allows us to recover the grant amount if somebody were to not follow that rule. The lender for this purchase would like to have the city's position put subordinate, or the city's mortgage put in a subordinate position to the mortgage that they would finance for this project, and that would be that would make it in a position where it'd be harder for the city to ever recover those funds if the owner didn't follow that program. It's not a very likely scenario that the owner would do that, because we'd still be able to exercise the provisions in the mortgage and that property could still be taken away. It would just, a lot of that funds would go to the bank instead of to us. So to protect the security or the city's position, even though it would be a more unlikely scenario, the buyer did sign a promissory note for both properties that would allow the city to pursue other funds beyond just what's in the mortgage from the property owner. So the value of other real estate, the value of their company assets, things like that. And that helps us to mitigate that risk. And so it does put us in a position where staff does recommend moving these properties into the hands of somebody who's going to develop the first floor. We have a strong assurance they're going to continue to follow the rules and that we're not going to have to repay money to the state. We have some things to protect us, but it is still going to be of benefit to get the sale done. And so this resolution would make those mortgages subordinate to the lender's primary mortgage for the property, both properties.
So just to clarify in not so technical terms,
Yeah.
what you're saying is that if the person buying this or the company buying this does not follow through with the 5-year expectation or however many months is left on it, the city is protected because of the note that they signed saying, hey, if we don't follow through that, it's not going to come back on the city.
Right. So we're basically, their lender's asking to get money first out of a foreclosure. And right, if we were to only do the subordination agreements, that wouldn't be a great deal for the city, because if we ever did a foreclosure, the bank would get almost all the money and we wouldn't have enough to repay the state. So the promissory note allows us to pursue any other ways of collecting money if that were to happen. And again, it is very unlikely that that would happen. It's irrational behavior on the part of the owner to allow us to do the foreclosure, because, you know, they would have raised the rent. So it's something that is unlikely, but we did want to do something that protected our interest beyond the mortgage if it was subordinate. So we did do the promissory note.
And I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in and add something?
Yeah.
So I think there's two important things that the city council should keep in mind with these agreements. So the first thing is the rental restriction. And the time period for the rental restrictions is, part of the way it's run. So the purchaser would be kind of taking over that obligation midway through. The other important thing to keep in mind is that if the terms of the upper story housing program agreement that the city has with the state are not met, then the state can demand that the city repay the amount of incentive that basically passed through the city to the developer. So these forms of security partially help enforce the rental restriction, but to the extent that there's a mortgage on a property or other assets that the city can go after through a promissory note, the goal of those forms of security is also so that the city could try to recover some of the funds that it may have to pay to the state if the obligations aren't met. So there's always going to be risk that the city may have to pay something, repay part of the incentive to the state. That you just have to accept that there is some risk, so that amount of risk lessens as the end of the rental restriction and contract approaches. And so hopefully by having the promissory note as an alternative to a primary position mortgage, the city at least has more options to try to recover funds if you do have to repay something to the state, and if you want to try to recover a portion of that repayment obligation from the developer.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Resolution number 89, 2022, authorizing execution of and directing service of notices under Iowa Code Section 447.9 related to tax sale certificates held by the city of Ottumwa. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 89, 2022.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Zach?
All right, thank you, Mayor. At the June 2021 public bidder tax sale, the city acquired the tax sale certificates for 7 properties. The notices for those properties can be served after March 21st, but the code requires that the city appoint an officer to serve those notices. So this resolution would appoint the city's attorneys at Allers and Cooney to begin the process of acquiring the properties. And the addresses of those properties were in the staff summary.
Any questions from council for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Engineering Public Works work session.
You're up, Larry.
Thank you, Mayor Council. I do have 2 guests with me tonight from V&K. They've been with us since the start of the separation projects. For some of you, Ted Pacer, if you guys want to just come up, we're just going to do a joint presentation, kind of go through all of the projects that we've done to date. We handed out some of the information to you earlier just to try to give you kind of some of the background, and we want to cover how we got here. We also have Randy Johnson with us. He also is V&K and is the principal design engineer currently on the Phase 8 east of Iowa, and will continue to act in that role as we go up through Blake's Branch. One of the things that I want to start with, a lot of times people say, how did we get here? Well, in 99, there was a small subdivision. I think originally it was going to be about 8 homes. I don't want to make a call. Thank you. So in 99, we had a developer want to put in a small subdivision, and we were actually denied a sewer extension permit. And they said you will no longer be able to add new sewers to your community until you come up with a plan of action to address the CSOs. Randy has some slides within that we're going to try to explain what a CSO is. It's really just a combined sewer outfall, meaning that under high flows, you're going to have a combined storm and sewage reach your receiving stream. So anyway, in 99, once we received that letter, we started working with the DNR and later with the EPA to come up with a plan of action of how is the city going to address an issue that started when the city was incorporated. And at that time, it wasn't uncommon for cities to have combined outfalls directly to the river. It was kind of before you had treatment standards and some of the known impacts that you have of just human waste within a receiving stream to the aquatic life. Anyway, fast forward, we went through several studies, hydraulic studies, and plans of actions, and those were completed in 2004. And then shortly after that, we went out, and that's where we first brought Ted and his firm in after kind of an extensive process of a selection, knowing that this was going to be a multi-year design and build project. With that said, we could just go into a PowerPoint and kind of take you through just some of the key features. Again, I handed out, it's a really short synopsis of each of the phases, 1 through 8, basically, along with a map that shows what we've done. If you want to just put up the sewer map, we'll start with that. Yes, we'll have that put up, and hopefully the camera can pick that up maybe for the general public. You can see the amount of area. We actually went back and forth. Do we start the separation with economic development in mind, or do we look at human health issues? And at that time, it was decided, and I think rightfully so, we'd start on the south side. At that time, we had approximately, and I don't remember how many years, we'd went out to the public and asked them to report any basement backups they had. In a combined system, one of the things that you have is surcharging of your sanitary system. So any home on a low-lying area that the floor drain backup check valve didn't work or some other things could occur, you'd have raw sewage come into your basement. I think at one time in about a 3-year period, we had 500 basement backups when we started this process and started the first separation project. You can see each phase we color coded on the south side. Of course, you had to start with phase 1, which built a backbone. And when you do these, you actually design the whole system and you have to cut them up to make something that's constructible. Ted, do you want to add something while I'm looking at this?
First of all, I know one of you, and I've had a lot of fun working for Ottumwa as a team since 2003. So I'm a West Des Moines kid. This is my adopted hometown. So we've had a lot of fun. And I would say that it's really the cooperation of mayor and council and staff that as we worked our way through this, we've taken on EPA on several occasions and got better deals and got a lot of money for grants. But the key to it is that we put together a consortium. There's about 10 cities in Iowa that have CSOs. And the reason they did that back in the 1800s was that was the cheapest way to provide stormwater and wastewater. And the intention was to dump it into the river. And then we've added wastewater plants since then. But because of that, actually it's been on the books since 72. And yes, my practice started before 72, Mayor. I knew you were going to ask that. But yeah, this is my 50th year in consulting. But we put together a consortium because what EPA was offering was, even though we've kind of sat on our heels, we want you to now get this all done in about 12 to 13 years. And we said, that's nonsense. Or Iowa cities cannot afford this. There's about 700 in some cities in the United States. And so they said, we'll agree to more long-term planning. And so we wrestled around with them for, 5 years, Larry, something like that. And we came up with not only 20 years, but 25 years for the city of Ottumwa. And we also were engineers pretty much for all the river cities on the Mississippi. And so we have a lot of background on that. But the key to it, as I see it, is that many, many times we went into the state and also DC, and try to explain our situation in Ottumwa, how we're disadvantaged. We're having issues that we're trying to fight our way through. We had a huge loss in population at one time. And because of that, it was a nice team effort, and we were able to be successful in a variety of different ways. And so now, as we're working our way through this, and everybody says, oh, we'll be awash with federal money, congratulations on your earmark, too. That's wonderful. But the problem is there's still another, $60-70 million yet to be spent over the next 10 to 15 years, which is a tremendous amount of money. And now we're running into the situation where EPA is not quite sure when we're done. And we tell the EPA, well, you might be the federal government, you don't have a budget concern, but we do. And we need to know what your expectations are and how we're going to be able to afford to do this. And so, like I said, it's been really, really fun for me to be working with you folks all these many years, and even with Larry. So go ahead.
Not sure I appreciate that. What we've done is we embedded this map within the PowerPoint. So I think what we'll do is kind of roll into the PowerPoint and let Randy kind of explain statewide. We're not the only city in this. I know in the past, I've had people come to me and say, hey, are we the only city? No, across the United States, and then the number of cities we have here in Iowa, it's not unique to us, but it's very expensive. You want to lead off, and then we'll just fill in details.
Good evening, Randy Johnson with Veenstra and Kim. Did not start my career in '72, just so you know, so it's out there. So Ted's a little older than me. But anyway, if you want to hit the next slide and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I got the controller. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of these slides, but there's just some good pictures that kind of explains what CSO is. And Blake's Branch is a drainage within the city. About 1,600 acres is what drains into this box. This is the outlet into the Des Moines River. A CSO, I think Larry was talking about it, is one pipe that kind of goes out to the river, but over time, we developed a second pipe that goes to the treatment plant. But anytime you have a wet weather, a large flow where the storm drains are now hitting into this pipe, you discharge into the river, or you have a combined sewer overflow. So that's kind of what EPA or DNR is trying to clean up with a lot of these river cities. That was, when this Blake's Branch was built, before I get to that. So this just kind of shows some of the states that have CSOs. This kind of shows the map of Ottumwa. All the little red dots are where CSOs happen in the state of Iowa. And kind of this slide just kind of confirms what, or restates what Larry was saying. Back in 2003, we started with you all to address the CSOs. About in 2011 is when we got the long-term control plan approved with DNR. It was 10 phases of this plan. We got 1 through 7 completed. There's 3 more that's still done. And one thing, like Ted was saying, Iowa or Ottumwa was the first community to get a 25-year schedule instead of trying to shove all this down in 10 years. This is kind of some construction pictures of past project. This is the box. You'll see some other ones, but phase 1 through 7, where we were, going along, providing a separate pipe for the sanitary sewer. So keeping the box for stormwater, because it's a nice big box, but adding sanitary sewer as a separate pipe to go to the treatment plant. This was the map Larry was kind of showing you south. You can see that isn't highlighted as a lot of the separation that's already taken place. And Blake's Branch is the yellow area, and that just shows how much more the drainage basin is still combining and going into the Des Moines River. Again, just kind of shows a couple of separate areas. So the difference between the blue and purple, the blue consolidates into a pump station and is pumped into the purple area into the Blake's Branch box. So we got some separation that needs to happen to the north of us too. Right here, this map is a map of the Ottumwa GIS. So the big dark red line that's highlighted, that is Blake's Branch box. That is a box that was constructed, I believe, started in 1899 through 1910. It's about 7,000 lineal feet. I'm sure it was just built in the Blake's Branch Creek at that time. They built this double wall brick box, which here's the engineering drawing, just shows you. 8-foot by 10-foot box, and then they covered it up, built streets, built houses, and then had pipes just going into it. So that is a combined sewer. That's what it is.
How long is that box supposed to last?
It's in pretty dang good condition, and we got some video. So it's been there since the early 1900s, and there's no reason it can't stay in. I mean, it's a large 8-foot by 10. You can't get any bigger pipe.
And our strategy is to reuse it. We're going to make that the stormwater carrier. And one thing I'd say about CSOs, all of the water that falls in that basin, it's not just wastewater from commercial residential. All of the water is part of the CSO problem. So the whole drainage area, but we're using, we've done some work on it, but especially on the west side and the south side. But that's the intention, to try to save some money by only rebuilding one pipe.
To go a little further in your question, each box is independent. We've had some on the south side where we could reutilize the existing, other areas where we had to replace it. It kind of just depended how the mortar held up. The bricks hold up very well. They're almost impervious, but it's the mortar that holds them together. We do have a quick little video for your entertainment purposes, just to give you an idea of the size of that. A lot of people don't understand the size of some of the box sewers and the carriers that we have in this town.
So if you ever have to build a new box, would it still be built with brick and mortar, or is it built differently today?
No, most likely it'd be precast assembled. We put one on the south side that basically crosses Church and goes up Sheraton. That's a 6x8. That's probably one of the larger ones we have put in. Some larger pipes, some 84s and stuff. This is an idea. Kick that on. This is the guys, our crews have been very inventive. That's our Ranger, and they ended up taking some of the bars off. They added a generator. They added a lot of LEDs. They had to go in and actually station that starting at the river. And again, that's roughly 7,000 feet long. He must have got a cobweb. But he'll go clear down to the river, and then they actually measure, walk out, paint the wall, put stationing on it, and they're very good at identifying size of pipes, which ones are active. That's all part of the engineering, and then actually there's surveys that are done inside to pick up. Those are open for tours if any of you are interested.
No, thank you. I'm good.
So that's just, a lot of people just don't realize there's several of those that cross our city. That particular box starts up by Penn and Jefferson and runs all the way to the river. And that's actually where we enter, is in behind the old Greenbrier.
So is there some kind of grills or grates where like animals and stuff can't get in there?
At times. We had gates and stuff on it. I think they're removed right now, and we're looking at how do we rebuild the end. It has some deterioration where it's been exposed. That's just yet another project that we need to hit.
I think we're about right to that. So here's some pictures of the actual existing Blake's Branch box. Just shows you, the one in the upper left is the intersection pretty close to of Birch Street and 4th Street. You can see there's a large box that goes to the east on 4th Street, but this is just some of the interior pictures, which we got the video, or do we have the video of that?
I'm not sure if we loaded it. You can see the difference in construction. That actually started out as stone culvert for the roadway, and then at a later date, the brick was added and extended. Like Randy said earlier on, it was kind of interesting when you look at the sewer log books that it was built, each year varied on how many feet they would install, and I assume it was just funds available at that time.
It is amazing though, for as old as it is, the good shape it's in.
The one from Chad, the drone flight.
While they're messing around, I'll tell you a quick story. Iowa City started their CSO back in the late 60s. And so I was the construction engineer. And we were out in front of the library, and we were probably 25 foot in the ground, and it was a stone box. So as much wastewater was running outside the box as inside the box, and there were rats and all kinds of exciting things. I looked up, and there was a really nicely dressed, gray-haired lady. And I thought, this is nothing but trouble. And so I get a phone call from the public works director. You need to go talk to the head librarian at University of Iowa. I said, that'd be great. And I said, ma'am, can I help you? Well, you guys are destroying history. And I said, well, understand what's running outside the box is into the groundwater, and we do have rats. And she said, no. And I said, yeah. And I said, you want to go down and see? She said, sure. So I gave her a hard hat. We put it in the bucket of the backhoe and put her down in the trench. She said, well, this is just awful. I said, that's kind of what we're doing here. So.
Sometimes you got to see it to believe it.
You do, you know, and
So this is a drone flight that Chad put together, or Public Works in the Public Works office. Just kind of shows the alignment of Blake's Branch or next to the river. This one here, this is where our new project connected to, and that's the Elm Street Pump Station. But it just kind of shows you an overview of what our project, where we've constructed. You probably heard south of the railroad where we kind of went and put in some new pipes, updated the streets. So everything south of the railroad from Iowa Street, down to Cherry is now all separated. That's the project that we did. It's been 2 summers ago. We still got to do some final surfacing in that area. But that kind of shows you goes next to Wimco, their processing plant or manufacturing plant. So JBS is just a little bit to the right of us there. So that is now all separated. We don't have one pipe going into, the pump station or actually another CSO point.
How far underground do you have to put that?
So the sanitary sewer in this area, we're like 18, 20 feet deep. And then, fortunately, we keep going uphill, so it's not like we got to keep struggling with that elevation. So that on Main Street, we kind of got a little bit deeper, 22 feet. But now Main Street, you've probably seen, that's been separated. The city already had some projects in the past where the storm sewer was separated up, the side streets, and now we've separated them. Now we have a storm sewer and a sanitary on Main Street, and that just we've completely separated. I think it was about another 150, 200 acres in this area. Yep.
And then one of the things that we have to do long-range planning, again, this plan goes to 36. This particular sanitary line that starts at the pump station, that makes it bypass all the current CSOs. This will ultimately pick up flow from the airport as we go through and pick up things that were separated and recombined. Like any of the streets we do on Jefferson, we separate and we design them to where we can pick them up when this line goes by. And we've got Woodland and multiple other streets that we've done that clear back to the early 2000s. So it's a kind of where you have to try to track the entire city as far as where you're going to go and then come through. Their specialty is sizing and basins and other design features that we have to keep in mind at the same time.
one benefit of the project, especially on the south side, used to have substantial flooding. And so we're picking up all of that water above the railroad to the north. And so it's also maybe a potential for an expanded industrial area too. But so the flooding is going to go away as far as south of the railroad tracks.
So on the north side, we have a lot of brick streets over there. Is the sewer system the same? Does it look the same as the boxes that are on the south side?
Well, the brick structures were typically probably at least 4 feet or larger. Below that, they use clay tile.
Difference. Thank you.
Yeah, so pretty much the PowerPoint, I think we're to the end, Larry. There's just some discussion points on
Kind of how Blake's is broke into multiple phases.
yeah, we can, I mean, you can put it up. Yeah, so really just, so part of the project, so we kind of broke it up. I didn't kind of show that slide at this presentation, but so this first project, like you were seeing, we were going up to Birch Street to Plum Street. The next project goes, you know, about another $6 to $12 million, $6 million a year. So another $12 million project to go up, you know, to about, well, not all the way to Pennsylvania, but that'll be the next phase. And then the final would be all the way to get to the end of the box, which is, you know, a little bit north. Yeah, this is the better map. The colors kind of show it. So our next phase, we're trying to do the green, then the following phase would be the purple up north, and then the final would be that blue. So that's kind of the separations that we're going to be happening over the next 12, 15 years.
So one of the things that we try to anticipate is different funding sources. Currently, what we see going through the legislation, we are under design for one while we're constructing the other one, and we'll always hopscotch in that manner to where we have one or two under design. One of the things that become apparent after the 2008 time period was what they called or named shovel ready. So we're trying to get far enough along that we can take advantage of that. And then we'll be making some decisions here in the near future. You know, do we go ahead and start a design on another one to try? Because we anticipate some of the money and funding as it comes through will go through SRF, which has quite a bit of different requirements than a local letting. All of that stuff has to be rolled into our planning and types of plans and funding scenarios.
So Larry, at this point, maybe it would be a good idea to talk about how, even though they're two completely different subjects, how the street planning goes in to work with the sewer separation planning.
Okay, and I have kind of a presentation on the street selection I was going to roll into. We could start that now. I mean, there's a little bit I wanted to cover.
I don't
on
want to
this.
steal your thunder. I mean, if you've got to put it at a different point in time, then that's cool.
What's that?
I don't want to steal your thunder. If you've got it at a different point in time.
Well, I was going to cover, we handed out some of the funding. We just wanted to kind of point out what we've done as a city and as a department. If you look through, we give you two handouts. One's just sewer separation project cost, but of course you have a lot of street funding you have to do also. So Mark, you've been here as we combine different funding sources. It's more than just sewer revenue. We include lost. We've got one of the slides on just different funding options through SRF. They've got a whole program. Ted's been exposed to this, so he could probably tell you more details on some of the nuances, but keep in mind that we do add lost into these programs, sewer revenue, TIF. There's a lot of different funding sources we use and combine, including grants. If you look on the sewer separation stuff we've done to date, just the sewer side, we've spent somewhere around 91 million, and we brought in about 34.5 million that's related to the sewer separation. On the second part of that was just the street programs, and that's one of the things that we try to address on our overall street planning and programming. We've invested about 83 million, but we've been able to bring in different grants in the $60 million range, or 72%. Over the years. And we'll just roll into the street program now. Do you guys want to finish a couple of your slides?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that, everybody's all excited about the infrastructure, grant, $1.3 trillion. And what we're finding is that water and wastewater and storm sewer projects, CSOs, are all coming through your state, IFA, Finance Authority, or SRF. And so what has to happen, you have to get on the IUP, intended use plan, which you are to a certain extent. And then they're going to start awarding, we're talking about social justice, we're talking about forgivable loans, we're talking about grants. They'll always make you loans, but the bad thing about loans, they expect to be paid back. And so what we need to do is that we need to keep up our political pressure, Mayor, I'm looking at you, is that we need to, through our league, and they're very active with this, and through our representatives and senators, we need to let them know we appreciate where we've gone. We've been first to bat to get our stuff done and get our schedule on. But now we're facing some tough times. Costs are going up, inflation is going up. And so we need to be sure we're firmly in line when the forgivable loans come out in the grants. And that's one of the things that it just won't be tomorrow, and they won't get the infrastructure grant put together by tomorrow. But in theory, it's a 5-year program. It's probably a 10-year program, but either we need adjustments perhaps in timeline, but certainly we want to make sure we don't miss any opportunities for grants and forgivable loans. And we can talk further about that sometime too.
Did you say we're on the list that we need to be on though, correct?
We are.
Okay, so
That's the state SRF, which the seed money came from the feds. It's pretty much self-financing now. It has pretty attractive rates. But I will tell you that all of the federal dollars are going to have federal strings. That's what's going to happen as far as American-made and environmental assessments and a variety of things. And that's just what it is. And so all the new money, we've tried to avoid some of those. It saves us some money. But Davis-Bacon Act wages and such, and the way wages are tracking anyway, everybody's going to be at least to that level or higher. But we're on the list. We just need to make sure that we exercise that opportunity and we're at the right amount of money.
Okay, so there's nothing we need to do at this, or I mean, I guess, is Larry, you're on top of that, or is that something that Phil is doing to ensure that we're on the right track for that?
That's a coordinated effort between finance, Phil, myself, the engineering firms, and our regulatory people. We keep in constant contact to look at what is the best advantage. Again, we've been in position where we've been able to take advantage of some of the forgivable loans that kind of shows up on the one spreadsheet. That wasn't really expected, but it was quite a benefit when you start pulling in, $1 million, $1.25 million in different locations. That's how you end up with, tens of millions of dollars into your coffers that you didn't have to take out of your own rates.
Do we foresee any more complications as far as the south side is flat and the north side has a lot of hills? Would that be any different as far as separating? As far as challenges coming in there?
Well, I think construction can be more difficult in higher grades, but all the systems developed over so many years that they can be challenging. And again, it kind of goes back to your question on how's the condition of the brick boxes. When you start building boxes that are 8 by 10, you start spending a considerable amount of money. Again, what we've been able to do over the years is assess both pipe systems that exist. Sometimes we use the sanitary, sometimes we use the storm. So it's a combination when you're doing your design. You have to take and do some engineering judgment on how long will this system last? What's the remaining life? If you're looking at all your street surfacing, say that its PCC is programmed to last 40 years or expected to last 40 years on a design life, will that system underneath make that 40 years before you have to do a new surface? So there's a lot of things, or do you have a surface where you partially replace it and it's only going to last 20? There's a lot of factors we weigh when we go, and that's probably more in the street selection process, but it's also used every time we do one of these separation projects. It all has to be evaluated.
Okay, thank you.
I think just to close out my part of it, think about being active rather than passive, because those who think, well, all this money's forthcoming, no, you have to be in the right situation. Sometimes you have to have designs, ready to go. And you have to understand that it is, the mayor knows, it's a game of going to DC. It's a game of talking to the state and say, listen, we've been at this a long time. We've been doing good work, but we need help because the last $40 to $60 million, it's a tough hill to climb. That's my whole notion is to stay active.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I did have one question for you guys. You showed a map of the United States that all these cities that have to do this separation. Are all those cities doing it currently, or are we is there just a handful, or how's that working out?
So what that came from was a report to Congress, I think around 2001 to 2004. So a majority of the cities are trying to comply, or a majority of the states are trying to comply with that, to keep their primacy, to keep their control over the waters. There are cities that push back a lot, but I think Kansas City is really proactive in what they're doing. I think Chicago maybe not as proactive in what they're doing. So it's just kind of how much they can push and how much they get support from their delegation and stuff like that.
The fun part of the discussion, this was 25 years ago, I was talking to one of my friends in EPA, and I said, once we sign these schedules, 25 years from now, he says, well, none of us will be around. And I said, I don't think that's a very good answer, but that's what they said. But that's kind of the challenge, because EPA realizes, we've been to several meetings in DC. Well, I'm almost there. Am I in compliance? Well, we don't know yet. That's not an acceptable answer for city budgets. So, but yeah, there's probably, we work for Omaha, and theirs was about $1.5 trillion. Kansas City was $7 trillion. St. Louis is more than that. Chicago has kind of said, thanks very much. Milwaukee's been doing it a long time, but it's a real challenge, because I'm afraid what the feds would like us to do is disinfect our storm sewers. Well, we have real issues in our receiving streams, and the billions of dollars that we would spend, it won't make any difference in the receiving streams. So, but that's just mean you got to kind of keep up on it and kind of ask the right questions. And by all means, we worked for Keokuk, and we got kind of a nasty letter back from EPA. They said, well, you shouldn't have to worry about it. There's money available. I said, let's do it this way. You give me the $30 million and then I'll do it. But that's, the mayor knows.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I will kind of go back. In the beginning, we had to also make the decision, are you going to transport and treat, or are you going to separate? When I took over the separation program, there was discussions of expanding the plant to 30 million. Well, operation cost is one of the things that just continue to rise also at about a 5% rate every year. So that's something that we made a decision early on, because we do have capacity for the industry and the citizens that we have. So there's a lot of little things to get to this point. And with that, let's just roll into the street project. Let's just pull that PowerPoint up. A lot of times what we get asked is, how do you select different streets? Just for background, and again for the citizens and the new council elect, you can see that it lists, we have about 320 lane miles of hard surface road. That's the way you track based on if you've got 4 lanes or 5 lanes like on Quincy. We got about 53 miles of alleys that we have to maintain. And again, we have a fairly small street crew to do all that maintenance. Roll to the next one. And we just listed, generally we have about a $54 million budget. And then again, the compliance schedule completion date for separation, which is also tied into street replacement, is 2036. Our current estimate, and we're not back through all the new numbers and have to add this newest inflation of probably 20 or 22% for construction cost, is 160 million. We've done approximately 91 million to date. So that'd leave us somewhere around 69 million left to do. And then I just listed what we have typically budgeted for street out of road use lost, and then different funding options that we put together to do this. Because one of the things that you have to do is put a surface back on sanitary and storm. When you're 22 foot deep, you take out the whole roadway. We just wanted to kind of show the council that there's a couple different types of projects. You got the full width reconstruction of PCC on your left, and then you have on the right kind of a mill and a fill and an overlay. Each have their place and purpose. Here's where we actually get into when we start looking at the projects. It's like, in order to do full width, do we need sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water main, private utilities is needed, which is the electrical, gas, cable, everything that we have. And that's something that we're starting to face more and more challenges with as we get more and more cable fiber in the ground. Now we've got 5 or 6 companies. Our right of way is getting very congested, and that means dollars to us. When we start bidding, our prices continue to climb as you have more and more of the utilities. They have to kind of thread pipe through or relocate, and it becomes more and more of an effort to coordinate those functions. And again, we designed to the current street manuals. Next page just kind of gives you some of what it looks like for a shallow sanitary sewer as it's going in, what a base looks like in that upper right. Once you strip your pavement off, you have to go in and do some soil conditioning, sub base before you put your pavement down. And again, some full depth pavement on the bottom. Kind of a before and after on the Pennsylvania corridor for those that remember when it was just 2 lane versus Penn as a full width with a center turn lane, and it functions quite well after that. That was a project that we budgeted 5 years of our STIP 2 different times to get that project done. Let's go to the next one. The hot mix asphalt, again, is just where you take an existing street surface, you mill it off, you have to do surface patch, then you do an overlay on top of that. It does have advantages. It used to be quite a bit more affordable than it is currently, with petroleum prices going through the roof and binder being one of the most expensive parts of that mix. Typically, you would say 15 years with crack sealing and a few other life extending surface preps. You could get 20 years just depending on what the base is doing. Again, just a general picture of construction. just another one where we milled and filled. We do like those from a timely construction point of view. The next slide kind of just shows what we've contracted. What we wanted to do is go back on this particular one, and we have a full manual for your view or the public's view. We don't actually put this manual out because it's such a intensive information item. It is available. It lists every project that we've done from 95 to 2021. So we've done 123 lane miles in that time period, either reconstruction or resurfaced through contracted projects. We've spent about 58 million doing street works. And in-house projects, we did 52.4 lane miles at approximately 6 million. We do the small projects where we're a little more cost effective compared to large projects. And again, it gives total lane miles and money spent. The next slide is the criteria. This is the one that I probably get the most questions on, is how do you select it? And the first thing we look at funding, does it qualify for any additional grant sources? There's some grants that are specific to collectors or arterials. Does Ottumwa Waterworks for residential or main lines, do they need to replace their water main? You know, they also have an aging infrastructure, just like we do with the sanitary side. Long range plans. A lot of times we'll stay out of an area. I think that Blake's Branch is a perfect example. We knew that has been coming for like 8 years, so we did minimal work there. We would simply do patching and stuff to try to keep, you know, damage from vehicles, but we knew we're coming in. We know we're pulling that surface up. We don't want to spend a lot of money and pull it out a few years later. Of course, traffic counts come in, and that has an impact on funding sources also. And the type of traffic, is it just local? Is it truck? Is it commercial? All those things we look at. And then we look at annual maintenance. You know, what's it costing us to keep that street in a functional state of operation? And again, existing utilities, that could be ours, it could be water main. And accidents for some of the safety funding. We look at that, public or pedestrian safety. That's the short version.
Larry, what are some of the main criteria? And I don't need to know all of them, but what's the main criteria of whether you're going to go in-house projects or contracted projects? Is there like one or two main reasons why you go one direction over the other?
Well, depending on the size, we're pretty limited with our crew on what we can do. Of course, we don't have full width pavers. You know, a standard paver would take about 20 people to operate. Our crew isn't of size to even run one of those. We can do half width. We can do short runs, you know, 200-300 feet. But our main function in-house has also changed, but is patching and repair, panel replacement, things like that. We used to do more in-house overlays, but with the pricing structure that we receive from HMA providers, it got to a point that the mix, what they charge us per ton for mix, and the difference in what they can haul with their size of trucks and multi-axles and what we can haul on a single axle truck, we weren't cost effective. They could lay it for about $10 a ton. We cannot lay it for $10 a ton. We can still do alleys. We typically don't in recent years. Just again, it goes back to cost. We look at that.
So has the rising cost of asphalt made it almost the same price as if you use concrete?
If you do equivalent designs, I would say yes. The interesting thing on equivalent designs, it's actually more asphalt versus the PCC. Depends which association you ask, if you're talking to the PCC association or the asphalt association. There's always those discussions. But if you do equivalent designs, we have let a few projects with equivalent designs, and the PCC was more affordable at that time. We haven't done that for a while because you have to build two sets of plans. You have to do two sets of quantities, two sets of specs. It adds quite a bit of work to our load. So there are times that makes sense. We do continue to have an asphalt program. We plan on adding probably a larger project this year.
Larry, I know we've had this discussion before publicly, actually. It's interesting that a lot of people in the community, you know, your perception is reality, and when your particular street in front of your residence isn't being fixed, no streets in the community are being fixed, and you know, we've heard that these folks all just ran for office, so I'm sure they heard plenty of that over the last few months. But the reality of it is, when you look at the data that's being presented, Ottumwa is actually doing a lot of road work, and they have been for quite some time now. And I think that this sort of material would be good for public viewing, like on the city's website, where people could actually see, hey, we have done whatever that number was, $100 and some million over the last 26 years. How much?
64 million,
Oh, yeah, because I didn't get a
175.9
packet, so.
That separate deal, you know, the sewer separation, keep in mind, also has a lot of street work.
Right.
And the way we present that, it's kind of hard. Are we trying to present the sewer work or the street work that's
Yeah.
separate?
Well, and I think that that's another thing that really comes into play. You know, when you talk about the street work in the community, when people are saying, why aren't you spending more money on the streets? Well, when we're under an EPA mandate to spend our lost funds and our road use funds on the sewer separation, that is completely out of control of the city of Ottumwa. You know, they always compare us to Des Moines or someplace like that doesn't, number one, they have a much better financial outlay than we do, but they're also not under the same mandate that we are. So of course they might be able to fix more streets than we are, but at the end of the day, it still really comes down to the city of Ottumwa really is progressing on street repairs. People just don't see it because it's a matter of perception. What's outside of their front door is what they think reality is.
Well, the other thing I think that's frequently forgotten is, say, asphalt streets have a 20-year life before you resurface them. They don't live forever. So if it's been 25 years since we did one, they might be in need of another mill and fill at that point. Or if you have base problems and streets have their own life cycle. I'd like to think they'd all last exactly 40 years, but they don't. Some last longer, some last a little bit shorter. But if you look at that map, I think we've done a pretty good area spending money around town. We, of course, are going to get the worst ones that we can first. Again, using all of our criteria. If it's a street that has 3 cars on it, it's fairly hard to spend $1 million on it when you have another street that has 2,700 cars. But the thing that we've tried to balance over the years, and we were very conscious of, and when we started these projects, was we wanted to make sure that as we funded our separation and as we selected projects, that we didn't take all the money, because we could have easily just taken all the money, not reduced rates or something, and you had no street work outside of where you were separating. If Blake's Branch ends up taking 8 or 10 years, that would be quite a time period to do no other work around town. And you're going to we have sewer failures, we have main breaks that blow up, several hundred feet at a time. I mean, those are just part of operating the city.
Well, and the other unfortunate reality, at least for my sake, is we have winter.
Exactly.
And winters destroy streets. No matter how good the concrete is, you put a multi-ton truck on it scraping the concrete, it's going to ruin the street after a while. There's just no getting around that.
And salt is very corrosive. Salt and then our reinforcing steel, that's always been an issue. I mean, you're talking 2 things that just don't like each other.
Thank you, Larry.
Does council have any other questions for Larry? If not, thank you to Randy and Ted for coming and contributing to Larry's presentation tonight. And Larry, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very informative and very helpful.
Thank you.
We don't need to take any further action, so I'm going to ask if anyone in the audience has any other agenda items that they'd like to bring up tonight that's not on our agenda. If not, I would look for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
We are adjourned, and thank you, everybody, for coming this evening.
I did.